we at now, and I stood on that. Even if it was leaving me standing out the ring a whole year, they trying to get me to fight other people. Just the fight I wanted, so I stuck to my guns and was like, I'm not fighting until I fight Terence Crawford. So my team got it going.
How was it having that extended break for you as a fighter?
This past year is very unnecessary.
What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, what you just heard was the voice of undefeated, unified, 3-belt WBA, WBC, IBF, welterweight world champion, superstar boxer, who is widely considered by many to be top 2, if not the number 1, definitely top 5 pound for pound best fighters in the world, in Errol "The Truth" Spence Jr., who has a record of 28 wins, no loss and no draw, 22 big wins by way of knockout, 33 years of age, 5'9.5" with a 72-inch arm reach, and the voice of former unified WBC, WBA welterweight world champion, superstar boxer Keith one-time Thurman, who is 30 wins, 1 loss, no draw, 22 wins by way of knockout. Keith Thurman stands at 5'8" with a 69-inch arm reach. With that said, Keith Thurman is not happy how things played out. But Keith Thurman, he only has himself to blame for the way things have played out. Keith Thurman is now 34 years of age. Keith Thurman has fought a total of 3 times in 6 years. Keith Thurman is not happy that he waited on the shelf to see if he can land this Errol Spence fight, and it didn't play out how he wanted it to play out. Keith Thurman was promised the Errol Spence fight, and this fight was being pushed for Keith Thurman. Everything was being done to allow Keith Thurman to be able to secure a fight with Errol Spence Jr. They even made Keith Thurman the World Boxing Champion, World Boxing Council, the WBC, better known as WBC, right? And people have other names for the WBC, but President Mauricio Suleiman, board of 32 members, they even had made Keith Thurman the mandatory challenger for Errol Spence's WBC title. But as you heard Errol Spence state, his main focus was this man, undefeated 3-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the reigning WBO, World Boxing Organization welterweight world champion, who is widely considered by many to be the number 1 best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, in Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford has a record of 39 wins, no loss and no draw, 30 big wins by way of knockout. He is 35 years of age, 5'8" with a 74-inch arm reach for Undisputed, a massive pay-per-view Undisputed showdown. And that's exactly what Errol Spence got. July 29th, Las Vegas, Nevada, T-Mobile Arena. Keith Thurman has been left out on the shelf. The last time we saw Keith Thurman in the ring was February 5th of 2022. That's an entirely too long for Keith Thurman. He's 34 years of age. He's inactive. But Keith Thurman, he sat around and he waited for Errol Spence fight. I told you guys the PBC, Premier Boxing Champion, founder and advisor Al Heyman and the team, they were pushing for this Keith Thurman Errol Spence fight. But Errol Spence, he was dug in. He stood firm on his word, as you heard in the beginning of this video, how he was being offered and being pushed into this fight with Keith Thurman. But he stated he let his team know the only fight I want is the fight with Terence Crawford. I'm going to stay and wait, stand firm and wait for Terence Crawford fight. So Keith Thurman, he stated this entire past year has been a waste. It has been a waste of time. It has been unnecessary. Yes, because Keith Thurman should have stayed active while waiting to see if the Errol Spence fight was going to pan out. There was reports that Errol Spence was going to fight Keith Thurman at 154. There was reports that Errol Spence was going to fight Keith Thurman in February. And Errol Spence even stated that he was going to announce his fight before he had this last car accident. But that just worked in Errol Spence's favor because he didn't want the Keith Thurman fight. So he stood firm on his word, right? Keith Thurman, he unified the belts March of 2017 against 2-division world champion Puerto Rican superstar boxer Danny Swift Garcia. And then Keith Thurman, he was inactive from that point on till January of 2019 when he came back and fought Josito Lopez. And then he fought Manny Pacquiao July of 2019. So he was inactive for almost 2 years again. Then after he lost to Manny Pacquiao and lost the WBA title, he was stripped of the WBC title. Keith Thurman was out the ring again from July 2019 to February of 2022. Okay. These are extensive periods of time that Keith Thurman is just simply inactive. Okay. And so with that said, Keith Thurman, right, is not happy how his career is playing out. He once stated that he wouldn't wish this inactivity on anybody, but he's not speaking up and he's not pushing for the fights. He wants to jump right from inactivity right back into the main fight with Errol Spence, and it's not going to happen, right? Remember, when Keith Thurman beat Mario Barrios February of 2022, there was talks of Keith Thurman possibly fighting Terence Crawford himself, right? But Keith Thurman decided to turn down Terence Crawford fight because the WBC made him the mandatory for Errol Spence. And he said that the 3 belts that Errol Spence had was unofficially the undisputed belts, and that's what he always wanted anyway. He didn't count the WBO, but prior to that, when Terence Crawford had beaten Sean Porter, he said he didn't see nothing special in Terence Crawford and that he was going to beat Terence Crawford, just give him some time, after the Mario Barrios fight. Then he changed his tune and he stated he was surprised that the WBC made him the mandatory challenger and he was going to stay that route. So he stayed on the shelf. He could have fought Terence Crawford, who stayed active, fought David Avanesian. That could have been Keith Thurman going into the fight while Keith Thurman was waiting to fight Errol Spence. He could have went ahead and fought Terence Crawford. And if he beat Terence Crawford, he would have had 2 major fights on his hands and would have been fighting for the official undisputed title should he have beaten Terence Crawford. But Keith Thurman, he decided after the fight with Mario Barrios that Terence Crawford wasn't on his radar and he was just going to wait simply for Errol Spence fight. And that didn't pan out very well, seeing as though Errol Spence had 0 interest in fighting Keith Thurman, right? And Errol Spence, now we know the PBC even put up a post, as we know, and they said, who wants to see Keith Thurman and Errol Spence fight? And Errol Spence, he himself went on the post and said, the PBC needs to take the L out of Lover. It's over. I'm not fighting him. Then he did another post where the PBC put up another post about Keith Thurman, Errol Spence, and he said, Errol Spence responded by saying, I said what I said and I meant what I said. When I said no, when I said never, I mean never. So Keith Thurman should have knew from that point forward, regardless of what he was saying and trying to convince Errol Spence in the world, that Errol Spence needs to go through him because he never officially lost his WBC title in the ring and that Errol Spence got a gift. Instead of taking that route, Keith Thurman should have stayed active. There was plenty of fights. Keith Thurman should take the fight with undefeated welterweight superstar title contender Jerron Boots Ennis, who is 30 wins, no loss, no draw, 27 wins by way of knockout. He is 25 years of age, 5'10" with a 74-inch arm reach. Keith Thurman needs to go ahead and make a statement and beat Jerron Boots Ennis if he could. That would make a statement for Keith Thurman. That would put Keith Thurman back in the conversation. But Keith Thurman himself, because of the inactivity, took himself out of the conversation for these big fights. It was Keith Thurman himself that took himself out of the conversation for these big fights, right? His own inactivity. And if this past year you were fully healthy and you were fully capable of fighting, well, then Keith Thurman should have spoken up. He should have said, listen, if I'm not going to get the Errol Spence fight and it's going to drag out this long, well, then I'm going to stay active. I'm going to fight somebody else until that fight presents itself. There was fights. He could have fought Amanda Stanionis. He could have fought Virgil Ortiz. He fell out the rankings. There's plenty of fights with Keith Thurman. He just wanted to pick and choose, and so it left him on the shelf. And now he's not happy that Terence Crawford and Errol Spence came to an agreement, and now he's left out in the cold. Because essentially, when you look at it from this standpoint, right, Keith Thurman is not going to fight Errol Spence or Terence Crawford because the winner of this fight, first of all, this is a 2-fight deal. So the loser can activate. They have 30 days to activate the rematch clause, which more than likely is going to take place at 154. And the winner is going to vacate the titles. So if he does fight one of these fighters, it'll be way down the road at 154. Neither one of them going to fight him at 47. So Keith Thurman is just going to be the odd man out. And the only person he has to blame for it is Keith Thurman. Yeah, we can blame the PBC. We can blame Al Heyman. But Keith Thurman has to speak up for his own career. Point blank and period. He's 34 years of age. He has to stand firm on the square. He should have said, listen, this is a fight, a big fight. I need Jerron Boots Ennis needs an opponent. Keith Thurman should be pushing to be the co-main event. Put himself back in the limelight against Jerron Boots Ennis. But let's see how this unfolds for Keith Thurman moving forward. July 29th, Las Vegas, Nevada, T-Mobile Arena. This is the most highly anticipated fight in 42 years. And Keith Thurman could have been a part of this, but he chose to sit on the shelf. That's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like your shitty videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.
Hi, my name is Heather Vahid Hardy, and you're watching Blue Blood Sports TV.